Good afternoon, and welcome to How to Manage a Difficult Boss. It was actually, although this is a difficult topic, it was quite fun to prepare for this. Number one, because I had a ton of interest from people who wanted to join and hear about this. This is a popular topic, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But there are also stories upon stories upon stories of bad bosses out there. We've seen it in popular media, songs that have been written from people like Dolly Parton, 9 to 5, talking about the drudge of work and the bad boss. We've also seen it in movies, funny movies like Horrible Bosses with Jennifer Aniston. And there are so many books that have been published about how to deal with your boss. In some of the top companies in the world, we hear rumors of bad leadership happening that isn't corrected. For example, Jeff Bezos, who we know is running a multi-billion-dollar operation at Amazon, was famously quoted as reading a document and in a meeting said, "This document was clearly written by the B team. Can somebody get me the A team document? I don't want to waste my time with the B team document." We've also seen this coming out of Tesla here in Silicon Valley. He famously demands 80-hour work weeks from his employees, famously exclaiming, "Not enough of you are working on Saturdays." So here we are in corporate America with these examples of companies that we often look to model our behavior and our operations after them, when at the helm come behaviors of bad bosses. It is predominant throughout not only corporate America, but throughout the world to see examples of bosses that don't necessarily motivate behavior. Now, the studies out there are overwhelming. They're indisputable at this point. People are motivated when they feel valued. Yet we still see these behaviors where people in superior positions are not treating others as valued. 75% of people, according to the Harvard Business Review, believe their primary stressor at work is their boss. 58% of people, according to HBR, trust strangers more than their own boss. 79% who quit their job cite lack of appreciation as their reason for leaving. If you have joined me today and you are in this boat yourself, where you are working for a boss where you don't quite click, you are not alone. It is tempting when you are in this situation to look for a lifeboat. In fact, it is pretty much inevitable as you continue to climb in your career and cycle through new opportunities that you eventually land under a boss that you don't necessarily click with. Sometimes the answer is staying, and sometimes the answer is leaving. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when you're in this situation, when you are reporting to somebody who you just don't click with. When you're in this situation, it feels crappy. There is inevitably a seep over in your personal life and in your business life. Both are disrupted when you're reporting to somebody you don't like. There's an increase in stress and unhappiness. Your self-confidence typically takes a hit, and you have a lot less sleepless nights. My name is Amy Sanchez. I'm an executive career and leadership coach. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about three main things as it relates to how to manage a difficult boss. Number one, what you can do when working under a difficult boss to make your life easier. Number two, how to mitigate the repercussions of a sour relationship with your boss. I'm going to share with you stories from clients that I've worked with in a coaching capacity, as well as personal stories to help you with this. So you can learn from others, and also ways to build a safety net just in case you decide you've had enough. So first, let's start with what you can do when working under a difficult boss to make your life easier. There are very good reasons to keep moving on, soldiering on under a difficult boss, even though your life is difficult. Perhaps the money is just too good to walk away. It's always good to explore ways to mitigate stress before you decide to leave it behind entirely and introduce change into your life. It is very easy to absorb the judgments of people around us. If you have a boss that you don't click with, chances are that you're picking up on the negative cues from your boss. Now, we are we are conditioned at a very early age to seek approval from people around us. Think about it. When you're a kid, the way that we encourage behavior with children is by saying, "Great job. You did such a good job with that." Then, as we get into school, it's assigning grades for the amount of work or how well we complete a task. Then, as it gets into college, it's the caliber of the school that we get into. And this goes on and on and on, upwards into our career until we reach adulthood. And we are now conditioned to seek praise from somebody in a superior position. And we've got a workplace that also positively supports this because our pay, our increase in pay, is directly related to the rating that our boss gives us. So there is a lot of motivation to get to a place where your boss looks favorably on you. The danger of this is it can often lead us to start assigning our own self criticism if we have an authority figure that we're reporting to who we don't necessarily click with. Now, this could be no fault of our own. There are many times when you're just going to be paired with somebody who naturally there's a personality mismatch. That's just life. Unfortunately, when it's your boss, it makes it much more difficult. In addition, um, it can be really hard when you are constantly around this negative energy to stay positive. I'm going to give you an example of a client that I previously worked with. She reported to a boss who had a tendency to gossip, had a tendency to turn their weekly meetings which were designed to talk about status updates into complaining about other coworkers. Now, because she had this strong inclination, now we've all been conditioned to have, to um, make sure her boss liked her, the way that she dealt with that was by bantering with her boss and appeasing her boss and continuing that conversation. It was making her quite miserable. But yet she didn't want to leave. She was in the events industry. This was last year during the pandemic. As we all know, the events industry didn't have a lot of hiring. And so there was a high motivation for her to stay. She really did like the company. So instead, we helped her change some of the behaviors that she had in those exchanges with her boss. When her boss went into banter mode, she simply didn't respond. Her boss, over time, got the hint that that was an inappropriate conversation to have and continued to keep the conversations very focused on work. So that's an example of if there's one thing that your boss does, oftentimes you can stop behavior on your end so it doesn't egg your boss on to keep doing that thing that really irritates you and perhaps goes against your values. Another thing to really tune into is going back again to this idea of self narrative. When you are constantly feeling like you're being negatively judged by others, it is human behavior to start to absorb some of that. What are some of the things that you've started to tell yourself about your behavior that's impacting your confidence level in a negative way? What are some things that you're telling yourself that just aren't true? You used to be a really high performer. You used to be great under a previous boss. You never used to doubt yourself or your abilities. This has only changed since you've been under a boss that you don't necessarily click with. A really good way to check yourself on this, because a lot of these self narrative thoughts can be unconscious, is start to record this through the day. So many times, what I'll have my clients do is make your unconscious thoughts conscious. Write down, either whether it be on a piece of paper or record it in your phone, every time that you have a negative self-critical thought that enters your head. Over time, look for themes that are coming up and really pressure test. Are these accurate thoughts? So, for example, let's say you were in a meeting and you at the end of the meeting you reflect on that meeting and realize that you should have said something differently. Instead of harping on what you should have said differently, think about the thing that you said that really was helpful and really did steer the meeting in the right direction. Now, this doesn't mean that you stop improving, because it's only upon reflection that we allow ourselves to improve. This just means you make sure that you balance your self narrative so that you are being fair to yourself in the midst of perhaps being managed by somebody who might not be as fair as you'd like to see. Now let's talk about how to mitigate the repercussions of a sour relationship with your boss. I'm going to share a personal story of mine as an example of what not to do. It can be really, really tempting when you get to a point where you're just so fed up with your boss that you lash out and you share the thoughts that you have been thinking in your head over and over and over again in a way that can be limiting to the future growth of your career. I had a particularly long couple of weeks. I was reporting to a boss who liked to spend our one on one time also complaining about other people. And so I didn't get the input that I needed to drive my projects forward. Um, Consistently, when we meet, it was focused on her complaining and what she was unhappy about, which was really, really draining for me as an employee and unmotivating. At the end of one particular week, when I had been under a lot of stress, I had been traveling for the past couple of weeks. I had been going 110% trying to deliver on a couple of projects I needed to take over the finish line with limited support from her. I snapped back at her in an email and I called her out for the behavior that I'd seen over and over and over again. This was 4 o'clock on a Friday. My phone rang and she lit into me. It was after that that our relationship went from me observing that it was uncomfortable and I didn't like it to both of us knowing that we didn't get along. And that did not help the trajectory of my career, and it did not make the situation better. So whatever you do, don't tell your boss you don't like them. It's never going to help the situation, even though you really want to, and your friends might cheer you on and tell you that you should. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Some really actionable things to think about to help you with this is to get to a point where you don't want to get to a point where your emotions start to overtake your actions. And so you cognitively can't think through the right step forward. So when you are working for a difficult boss, stress control is more important than ever. Make sure that when you shut down at the end of the day, you try to shut down and really take time to recharge. Make sure you get enough sleep. Uh, Make sure as much as you can, you spend the weekends to really recharge and refresh yourself. It is in these situations where we are renewed and recharged that we can be more in control of our actions. And this is even more important when you're working for a boss that you don't like, because it's it's very likely that you've got a lot of negative thoughts firing in your head. In addition, when you have a difficult boss, pay extra attention to the proportion of time that you work versus the proportion of time when you have free time. Going back to, you need to make sure that you have time to recharge. We can get in this cycle when we are working for somebody that we don't like, that if I just put in this extra report, if I just go this extra step, maybe this will turn things around. Maybe this person will actually see and recognize the contribution and value that I'm bringing. Over time, that can lead to burnout. So not only are you burnt out, but you also are reporting to somebody that you don't necessarily like and isn't very supportive of you. So be fierce about your boundaries when you're working for somebody that you don't necessarily click with, and make sure that you've got the appropriate time that you need to recharge, because life is already tough enough with this manager. I had a client who was a CMO in San Francisco working for a rapidly growing healthcare company and was working for a boss who was notoriously known as a difficult boss. In fact, her and the rest of the executive board had done a 360, and it came out very clear in the 360 that people did not feel motivated by her behavior. They were hoping that the behavior would change after that review, but unfortunately, nothing did. She got to a point where she was continuing to answer emails on the weekends, answering emails at night, and she's also got a young child at home. The more and more she let her work life seep into her personal life, the more unhappy she became, and the more her boss got permission to reach out to her at all hours of the day and night and weekends. As we started to work together and she started to put some practices in place to build boundaries, she trained her boss to back off on that behavior while she got the most needed time to spend with her family, separate work from life, and recharge. It really allowed her to gain an additional perspective on, okay, why am I here? And how do I make sure that I don't let my difficult boss get in my head and throw me off my game? So, really think about the barriers that you're introducing if you're working for somebody who is difficult and how much time that you're allowing to zoom out and look holistically at your life and what is working and what isn't working. So you're not getting sucked into the stress of a boss that is difficult. Now, I don't want to minimize how difficult this is. When you're working for somebody that you don't click with, it can really wreak havoc on your life. But try some of these methods to give you a little bit of relief to see if this can help you weather the storm. Many times in organizations, what we see is if you're there long enough, you will find yourself under a new boss in a short amount of time. This is particularly true for larger companies, not so much at startups. They can have bosses there for many, many years. But if you're at a larger company, sometimes if you just wait it out, you will find yourself under a new boss. This takes us to our third topic, which how do you build a safety net just in case you decide you've had enough? I had another client whose name was Bill. He worked at a very large biotech company here in the San Francisco Bay Area in a senior role. And he'd been with his company for 20 years. He was very passionate about the project that he was working on. He was a really empathetic leader and he built a team. He had a high performing team, one that he was fiercely loyal to. However, he'd been working under a boss who wasn't fighting to get the resources that his team needed, didn't manage up well, frankly, had really damaged the ability for his team to do the job that they needed to do with excellence. In addition, he just wasn't feeling valued. He wasn't getting that support that he needed from his boss to give him that motivation that he was used to and that he wanted to deliver to do his best work. Over time and working together, he gave himself the permission to start looking. And it was very quickly after he started looking that he found another role. And he's been in this new role now for a year and a half. It was a promotion, it's higher pay, it's working on the product, the disease state that he's quite passionate about. And he's in a position now where he is working for a boss that is much more motivating than his last one. So in his situation, it was the right decision to leave because he'd been under a difficult boss for so long. No matter where you are, it's always good to build a safety net in case you decide you've had enough. There might be one day that you wake up and you just decide, I am done with this. In that case, here's what you should do. Recruiters are working overtime right now. There is a huge surplus of jobs in the market and a shortage of good talent. In those times when you might have decided not to take all of those emails that you're getting from recruiters and calls to explore what's out there, I encourage you, if you're particularly working under a boss that you don't like, to hear what those recruiters have to say. Start warming up your recruiter network and just hearing what's out there, what's available to you. And this is always a good practice anyway, even if you're happy with career, so that you are fully aware of what you're worth on the open market. This helps you when you go to negotiation. And a lot of people will say, but Amy, I am nervous that my boss will find out that I'm looking. It's not a bad thing if your boss finds out you're looking. In fact, that can be the extra motivation that your boss needs to recognize that you are a flight risk, that you could leave, and that might motivate them to think about how they treat you differently. In addition, it's just good practice for you to look out for yourself and look for careers out there. So take those recruiter calls, explore what's out there. In addition, spend some time thinking about what you like. You likely have been in a space where you've been thinking a really long time about what you don't like, which is very easy to do when you have a boss that you don't like. Carve out some time to think about what you do like. What are the tasks that you enjoy doing? What are your strengths? Then strategically network with some people, both within your company and outside of your company, who are doing the roles that you would be really motivated by. Get to know them, warm up those relationships, uh, help those conversations help you determine where you might want to go next in your career. This can help you be um, very proactive when navigating your career internally. It can also help you make a transition faster. So if you find another role either within your company or externally through these networking conversations that you like, might be a good time to jump ship when you have something better. So I encourage you, if you're not already doing this, and you should always be doing this at a more senior level in particular, is to find time at least once a month to be networking, both internally and externally, so you keep your network warm. Networking is by far the best way to find a new role. 70 to 80% of jobs are found that way. Up to 90% of jobs at the VP level are found through networking. Finally, to top this all off, Americans are shockingly under indexing on the amounts of vacation that we take. The statistics are quite staggering. We forfeited nearly 50% of our paid vacation in 2017 for fear of falling behind. You have earned your paid vacation. Take your paid vacation. There is actually a study that shows that those who maxed out their paid vacations were more likely to get promoted. They were more likely to get raises. So your vacation is there for a reason. Please use it. It is a really easy, low hanging fruit way to make sure that you recharge and also renew yourself with a fresh perspective and are able to come back and tackle all the stress in your job, particularly if you've got a difficult boss. The last thing I want to leave you with is if you try all these tactics and you just find that none of this is working for you, and you really do want to explore ways to leave your job, but you want to make sure that you do it in such a way that where you land in your next role is going to be a role that's fulfilling. This could be a good time for you to explore executive career coaching. So I'm going to leave my website on here, a place where you can go to apply for a discovery session. I don't accept everybody, but if you are a good match and if I do think I can help you, I will invite you in for a discovery session and we can explore what your specific situation is, what your goals are, and how do we get you to a place where you do land somewhere where you feel valued and working on work that you're passionate about. So I hope I've given you some good ideas to think about as you navigate this difficult relationship with your boss. Know that you're not alone. There are things that you can do, and many of this starts with you and boundaries that you put in place, your self narrative, and how you're talking to yourself, and then building your safety net both within the company and outside of the company, networking to ensure that you've got options if things really do come to a standstill with your boss. I wish you all the best, good luck, and please reach out and let me know how it goes.